Hello again, everyone. Here to do another video, and this time we're going to be talking about Civil Labeler. This is basically the same presentation that I just gave at the 2023 FLUG conference. Had a really good turnout for that. Both sessions were full of people, and I got a lot of good feedback, good questions. It's a really good time seeing everybody and getting all of the feedback and seeing how you guys are going to use Civil Labeler and teaching you how you can use it to, really work on your projects and make everything a lot easier to label. And with that, let's just get right into it. So utilizing Civil Labeler is a helpful and dynamic way of placing labels within your plans. Creating your own custom labels is an excellent way to speed up production. You can share these labels with coworkers and continue to use them on future projects. So using Civil Labeler, we'll go over a few things here, explain all of the different available options. Essentially, we're kind of talking about the things at the bottom of Civil Labeler and what all of these things do, but we'll also go over all of the other options in the dialogue. And we're going to end up creating a couple labels from scratch and place those labels. So when we create a label is essentially made up of 5 things: a text style, text favorite, dimension style, element template, and then the label definition itself. And then we'll go into some configuration, whatever you end up calling your dgnlib. I've just said labels main here. That is, I'll show you how to set up the configuration variables so that that dgnlib is available in any file that you need it. And so here we're looking at some of the available options in Civil Labeler. These are all of the items at the bottom. So if we go back here, this is just all of the items that are at the bottom of the dialog here, and I'll explain what they all do. So first up is dynamic justification. That allows the justification to move depending on which side of the leader the text is on. And we typically have that on. View independent, when enabled, the label will hold its orientation when the view is rotated. So obviously when we're doing a plan sheet, we have oriented the view to the plan sheet before we start placing text. And we want that text to stay at that orientation even if we rotate the view. Oftentimes we have alignments that have curves in them, and that makes the views rotate. So obviously, whatever view we have set when we place that text, we want that text to stay at that rotation. View readable pretty much only applies to text that's on bearings or it's called slopes. So that allows the text to rotate and not appear upside down. So it'll always read properly. And we just leave this on. The labels I go over today aren't going to have anything to do with view readable, but it's safe to leave it on. Annotation scale, that's always on. I think everybody uses annotation scale when they place their text notes, and labels. So I feel like leaving annotation scale on is a good idea. Element association, so enabled, the relative association and rotation association can be used. So that basically just turns on these two things to be able to be used. Typically you can leave it on, but you could just turn it off if you're not using either of these two things. Annotation association, the leader line linked to element, typically that's going to be on. That means when we place that label, whatever we snap to and place that data point to, be at the end of a line, a curve return, whatever it is, that leader is going to stay there. So if somebody moves that point in the model or whatever line that is attached to, the leader line will move with it and the label will update. So relative association means that the leader will move, but the text will also move with it. So essentially, annotation association makes it so that the text stays in the place that you put it, and the leader will move and extend out or back depending on where that endpoint moves. Relative association means that the leader that you placed the first time essentially stays with the same dimensions, and the text moves with the point. So you basically your label looks exactly the same. I typically have this off because when I place text, oftentimes we get into situations where that text has to be in that spot because we have so much text. So if something moves, I could just go ahead and move that text to wherever it needs to be. Sometimes relative association can get a little dangerous if stuff's starting to shift around. Rotation association, that kind of goes hand in hand with view independent. That's going to be for bearings and slopes. And typically that's going to be off. Like we don't want our station offset label that we're going to be seeing today to rotate with the element that it's associated with. We want it to be view independent. We want it to stay at the orientation that we placed it at. So one of the questions I got was somebody was having issues with some of their text rotating when they would leave a model and come back. And this could potentially be the issue, is that when they placed that label, rotation association was on. And so when they placed the label, it was view independent and rotated with the sheet. But then when they left, the text, for whatever reason, thought it needed to be at the orientation of the line that it was associated with. So typically that's off unless you're dealing with a bearing or a slope. So now that we've gone over that, we'll jump into ORD and go about creating our dgnlib. Okay, now I'm in my labels main dgnlib here, but the good question is, how do you go about creating this file? So I'm sitting here in the FDOT Connect 10.12 folder, and what you want to do is we basically just need a dgn file that's empty that we can start populating with all of the items that we need for our labels. And so, you could grab any file and change the file extension, but I think it makes sense just to start with a blank file. I suppose you could, if you have created labels in a file, you could copy that file over into the location I'm about to show and rename it and make sure it's a dgnlib. One of the things I would make sure of is that it's relatively cleaned out of other feature definitions and all of that other things, so that we don't get duplicates of things. So that's why I almost suggest just grabbing a clean file. So what I'm going to do is go into Organization Civil. So back to here, Organization Civil is the FDOT delivered configuration. Typically, you don't want to go modifying anything in here. Workspaces is the place that FDOT has set up for companies to go and place their own standards. So I'll go over that once we get to it. So you go into Organization Civil, FDOT, and I'm going to come down to seed and find this FDOT ORD 2D seed. So that's the seed file that you use for pretty much everything when you use the create file tools. If you're creating a DSGN or an ALGN file, it would use this file to start up the file. So you can go ahead and copy that file right there, come back up to FDOT Connect, go to Workspaces, FDOT, Standards, and you want to go into the dgnlib and feature definitions and paste it right here. And then I've already done that and renamed it to labelsmain.dgnlib. Another cool thing about this particular area is this is where you can start putting all of that custom stuff you might want to make. So like if you have a custom cell library, you can put it into here. And FDOT has already set up configuration variables that will look for a cell library in this location and load that every time you load ORD. Or if you want to have some civil cells that you use and want to show up everywhere, here's where you'd put that. So right now we're talking about our label definition file. So we've got labels main right here, and I'm in that file right now. So obviously when you grab that file, nothing's going to be in it. So what I ended up doing is I just created a terrain model. So I just drew a couple lines on construction lines, green dash here, gave them an elevation, created a terrain out of it so that I had some sort of test bed here to work off of. And then I created a couple of alignments and a couple of returns in here. And all of this stuff has profiles on it. So that these alignments have profiles, these returns, these edges of pavement essentially have profiles on them. So I'm able to test all the station offsets, all the elevations, anything that I create here, I can test out the labels and make sure they work properly before I start using them on a project. So now that we've got that file set up, we need to start out by creating a text style. So if you go to Drawing Production, and you can click right here for Text Style Manager. And you can see that I've got some text styles showing up here. And if you hover over there, you can see that they're coming from my console main.dgnlib that was in that same folder. And right now I have my configuration variable set up so that every time I open a file, I can see that console main dgnlib. And at the end of all this, I'll show you how to set up those configuration variables so that this new dgnlib also shows up everywhere. But we'll start with FDOT small here. So this, you can see where this style is coming from. It's coming from the FDOT standards features. So see how they've had to name that file because of the way that the configuration files are set up. They're looking for those words. They're looking for the word label or text or dimensions in the name of the dgnlib. So I can right click this and copy it. And we're going to set up our station offset style. So FDOT small has a line spacing of 0.5. And if you start using that with lines where you have a delimiter essentially in there, it's going to look like the text is sitting too close to that delimiter. And this is kind of the same way that Geopack Plan View Labeler was set up. There was a little extra line spacing when you use Geopack labels. And so I'm just going to rename this. So you can kind of click on here until you can rename it. And we're just going to call this, we'll just call this test station offset. So we're going to kind of use that naming convention a lot as we cycle through this. So when I was in Flug, I was calling this Flug station offset, but we'll just mix it up so that this is more generic. So we've got test station offset down here. I can double click on that, make sure it's active. And you can see that now it's saying it's a local style. So that text style is now saved in this file. The only thing I really want to do is change this to 0.7. I found that's pretty good for giving an appropriate amount of space between that delimiter. And go ahead and save, and now that is saved in this file. So the next thing we need to do is go ahead and create a text favorite. So we can go to our text favorite manager. And you can see here I've got various text favorites. I'm seeing the ones from the FDOT standards. I'm seeing the ones from my console main. And so I want to kind of set this up similar to either my console main or to the FDOT standards. So FDOT standards has text favorites for roadway, right-of-way, drainage, utilities. For my console main, it's very roadway centric. So I just started out with plan, but we can just follow the FDOT standards for now. You can kind of decide how this is organized, but really think about it because the organization does become very important as you move on and create more and more labels. Makes it easier to find the text favorites that you're looking for when you're creating your labels. So we're going to create a new category. We'll call that category roadway, and we'll create another new category on here called plan labels. Okay, now we've got our folder structure similar to what we had in FDOT standards features. So you can either right click or we've got buttons up here that do the same thing. So I'll use the button this time. That's a new favorite. And I'm going to call this test station offset to match that text style that we created. So now we begin constructing our text favorite, and you can see it's already got test station offset. That's kind of nice. Not sure why it did that, but you want to make sure it does that. So you've got that text style that you created previously. So we're just going to create a station offset label. So we're going to start with station space. And I did want to show this select element to show element properties. I haven't had enough time to play around with this tool to see how useful it can be. The point of it is for you to select an element and be able to see all of the available field types that that element has. I was kind of thinking maybe it would kind of filter out in these selections the available fields, but it doesn't really do that. And so you can experiment with that, see how you feel about that. I haven't really dug into it enough, and I've gotten comfortable enough digging around in these field types to know kind of where things are. So we'll just do that for now. We'll go into field type, and a lot of the things that we're going to want to use are in civil element properties and in annotation, in linear, and plan annotation. So you can see as we whittle down here, there is a lot of data that we can use for a field that we're going to populate here. So we can start looking in some of these here. So like what we're going to want is a point, and I'm going to want the point station. Okay. So I can click on that, and it brings up the various formatting options that we have for that point station. And down here, you can see we have a preview of what we're going to get. Ideally, you want to change as many of these use active settings as you can to something static so that the label stays the way you want it to be, because active settings could change from file to file. So I'm just going to go ahead and select the settings that I want for the station offset format. See, it stays the same. Delimiter is that plus between them. Precision, we usually want 2 decimal places. These are where you can set up some of the equation stuff. We can get into that in some later videos on setting up station offset label. For now, we'll just leave that as use active settings. Drop equation name. If you have a station equation, often ORD requires you to give it some sort of letter or number or something to denote what the equation is, like what one side is and what the next side is. So like in one of my projects, you know, I have, it's M. So it'll put an M before all of the station offset labels that are after the station equation. So if you want to drop that M, essentially, or whatever letter it is from this, you would just put this to false. If you want to keep it, then you put this as true. I just leave this false typically. So when you're done setting up your station format, you can hit accept, and you can see it's put plan annotation point station up there. That can kind of be a little confusing because you're maybe not going to know what exactly you're going to get out of that. So I like to delete that and turn on save preview and hit accept. And now I get what's in the preview and have a better idea of what is actually in this label. So now we want to come down here and we're going to do the offset. So we can come down here and find point offset. And we've got positive prefix, negative prefix. Typically FDOT, we don't have prefixes, we have suffixes. So a suffix, when you do that, you want to put a space before that. And positive is typically to the right and negative is typically to the left. So the positive suffix is capital R, lowercase t, dot. And the negative suffix is space L, T dot. This is kind of something I've been careful with for a while now. I had a project when I first started out where I had, capital L, capital T, and sometimes I had a dot and sometimes I didn't. It's good to know that standard FDOT abbreviation LT, capital L, capital T is for left turn, capital R, capital T is for right turn. So you could do capital R, capital T, but you got to make sure you have that dot because that signifies right. So just make sure you review the standard FDOT abbreviations in the standard plans so that you know what it needs to be, but you should be safe making it look like that. And because we have these suffixes, we don't need to show a sign. So I'll turn the sign to never. And if you want to use a sign instead of a suffix, depending on what your client wants, maybe you get rid of the suffixes and you say always or only negative. So if it's only negative, if the offset is on the left, it'll show a negative. If it's on the right, it won't show any sign. So just be aware of that. We can scroll down here, and for the label format, I want master unit. So MU is master unit, SU is secondary unit. So I want to show master unit labels so that I get this little foot marker here. And all of this we can leave, but we want to set the accuracy again to 2 decimal places. And all the rest of this stuff looks pretty good. If you ever want to start messing with it and see what it does, go for it. It's a good idea to kind of play around with it. And that's why we have a test bed out here in this file to test out what all of this stuff does. So you can see I've got in my preview what I want it to look like. I've got save preview checked, and I'll hit accept. Okay, so I've created my first label. You want to go ahead and hit save over here. And again, this is a local style, essentially a local text favorite stored in this file. So we can go ahead and save that. The next thing we need to do is create a dimension style. So dimension style, you got to go, I usually just place a note and then come over here and open the dimension styles dialog. There's probably various ways you could get to it. That's the easiest way that I know. So FDOT note line is the one I use when I place notes a lot. So we're going to go ahead and copy that. And we're just going to call this test station offset like we've been calling everything else. Make sure we're editing that particular one so you see it's a local style. We're going to go to text. Let's go find test station offset so that we're making sure that's our text style. And the terminator, this right now has an arrowhead for notes, but typically for station offsets, we have no terminator. And the inline leader here is set to 2. I'm going to set it to 0.5, but that's really only going to apply when I use it for place note. The inline leader is controlled inside the label definition, which we'll go over when we get there, but this does not control a civil labeler label. So we'll get to that when we get there. And then the last thing I want to do is come over in general, place or advanced general placement. And the level, this is the level that it's going to place the leader line on. So I've had issues in the past, which I need to go back and update my console or main dgnlib with, is the delimiter, or the bottom line as they call it in the label, is control, or the level that it's on is controlled by the text style in the text favorite. So in our case, it's going to be placed on the level text label. The dimension is controlled by this dimension style. So when I created my dimension style, I didn't go and change this. It's on dim lines, DP still. So my dimensions show up on a different level, and text label has a weight of 2, dim lines DP has a weight of 0. So you end up getting this difference in line weights where the label meets the dimension. And we don't want to do that. So we can come in here and change this to text label. Text label, where are you at? There we go. Okay. And I did get a question at Flug concerning like, okay, what if a reviewer comes back and says, oh, your line weights are too thick? I really wouldn't worry about it too much. When you print it, it doesn't really make much of a difference. I can see it when I'm in CAD, but when it prints out into a PDF, it doesn't really make too much of a difference. So I can't honestly imagine that a reviewer would really catch it. And text label, as far as QC compliance, is a perfectly fine level in pretty much every file that you go into as far as like proposed design, especially a text file. So there shouldn't be any issue using this. So now that we've made the changes to that, we can hit save. Now that is, again, saved as a local style in this file. So the next thing we need to do is create an element template. So I've got this attributes docked to all my screens because I like having that here, but you can find it in home is where it usually is. And this is where all your element templates are in this drop down here. And we want to go to manage. And because I copied the seed 2D, it's got a bunch of element templates in there, but I don't want all of these element templates in there because I'm basically creating a duplicate. So I want to delete everything that's in here. I want this to be empty and I want to create some new ones. So now we can just set this up similar to the way they have this here. And so I'm just going to create an annotation folder and a text folder. So we'll go ahead and create a new template group and call it annotation, and create a new template group and call it text. And then in this case, let's just copy one of these in here. So we can start looking at what some of these element templates do. And we'll just grab this text label. So you can see sometimes these have a dimension style associated with them, like text label does have a dimension style associated with it. So let's go ahead and copy that. And we'll paste it up here. And I want to rename it because if I don't rename it, I'm going to see text label twice when I go try and search element template. So we'll just call this test station offset. And the level is going to be fine. That's what I want everything to be on, but I want to grab the dimension style that I just created, test station offset. So this just basically makes everything show up on text label now. And for element templates, for whatever reason, you don't have to save. It's already saved. So now we've got all four things we need to start constructing our label definitions. So let's go ahead and open up this stuff. And I'm going to click here and open up libraries, which will allow me to kind of look at how FDOT has organized their label definitions. And we can look at how I did it too. So they've got label definitions, roadway, plan. And so that's where all of their stuff is. I did console roadway, so it's important to call it something else so that the folder, if I called mine, this folder here, roadway, in this file, I would end up with two roadway files and I wouldn't know which is which until I open it up because obviously the one we're using now would have way less labels. So that's why I called mine console roadway plan. So in our case, we want to come down here to this file and I want to create a new category and we're going to call it test roadway to kind of match the convention that we've been using. And we'll do another category called plan. And then I want to do new for a new definition. And we'll call it test station offset. So you can see in mine, if we go, I've got like my labels organized into station offset. So I called it full station offset. You can kind of experiment with your organization of this stuff if you want and figure out how you want it properly organized. But typically it's going to be like one or two people that's managing this whole label definition thing. So now that we've got it created, we can go ahead and manage. Bring this over and we basically have an empty box. So you can see the first thing, it's pretty obvious. You've got to select a text favorite. And so we're in our labels main dgnlib, roadway, plan labels, and that's the only one I got. So when you open that up, it shows you we've got two targets. Those are the two fields that we located or we loaded into the text favorites manager. And that is essentially like, what are you going to click that pulls the data for those fields? So we had two targets because we had two different fields, but in this case, first one we want to select, and that's going to prompt us to go ahead and select the alignment that we want to pull the station from. And target 2 says the same as 1 because we want to pull the offset from that same thing that we clicked, from that alignment. So it's the same as 1. So now once we've got that set up, we can come over here to placement. And there's a whole bunch of location methods here that I haven't gotten a chance to experiment with too much, but I typically just use data point, especially for this, because it's just going to be a point that I want that station offset for. We just got done setting up our element template. And so we're going to go to annotation, text, and then text station offset. So you can see like it doesn't sort this by the different dgnlibs it's pulling it from. It kind of just dumps everything into the same folder. So like I have mine set up as annotation text. And so it's dumping it into the same folder as the FDOT standard element templates and my element templates from my console one. But we can see the one that we created here is test station offset. And then this is something kind of new in either 10.11 or 10.12, where you could override the dimension style or the text style that's being loaded in the element template. But since we are setting everything up ourselves and have it exactly the way we want, we can kind of ignore that. And so we want to go to leader location. So this is an interesting one too. In 10.10, this option right here that I have highlighted, auto left, right, center, was called auto left, right. And then when they went to 10.11, they changed that to auto left, right, center. And so every label that I'd created, every label that FDOT created was broken because it was no longer finding auto left, right. So we both had to go back in and redo all of our label definitions to choose auto left, right, center for everything to work properly. So just be aware that you might have to do that if you're going from 10.10 to 10.11. But hopefully they don't change this again. It was like this in 10.11. It's like this in 10.12. So hopefully that's the last description they decide to use. And so here's that extension line where we want to change extension. So you can see it's 2. 2 is a little bit long for me. I use 0.5. You, again, can experiment with that and whatever you think looks right. I mean, kind of go for it. There's really no set distance for that extension line. It's just kind of what you think looks best. So border frame, this is where you could select any of the border frames here, and the offset of that frame would be set here. So that's how far away the frame sits from the text. There's not typically a whole lot of border frames I use. The only one I use is more when I'm placing a note for a curve data or a curve label essentially. So when I'm pointing to a curve and I am referring to the curve data, I'll put that in a capsule. But that's usually with a place note, and that would be controlled in the dimension style when you're using place note. And so the last thing here is on this section is called text divider. So this is basically your delimiter line that you're used to seeing in Geopack Labeler. And you can choose any number of lines that you want it at the bottom over. You can do bottom, top, split. So split obviously only works probably if you've got 2 or 4 or whatever. So in this case, I could use split, but I just want to use bottom of line 1 so that it divides the 2 pieces of text like we're used to seeing with a station offset label. Moving down to this rotation section, I have always used view horizontal because that makes sense. I want it to be oriented to the view horizontally to what I just rotated my view to. I haven't really experimented too much with just using horizontal, and I know all of my labels use view horizontal. All of FDOT labels use view horizontal as it pertains to these types of labels. So I feel pretty comfortable just using view horizontal. Our reference is going to be target 1. And now we're down here. I kind of already went over what all these buttons do. You can see the first 3 here on right here. I want to disable that rotation association because I don't want this thing rotating to the orientation of the line that I click. You can see everything else is on. The other button here we have is enable collapse mode. That doesn't really do anything with the label, but it makes it so that when you place the label, it will collapse this dialog box so that you can more easily see what you're doing. So we'll just turn that on too, and we'll hit save. So that saves that label definition. It's now there. And we're good to open up the Civil Labeler and test out our first label definition. And you can see how it's a good idea to properly label this folder right here so that when you're opening this up, you have a differentiation between FDOT's roadway folder or right-of-way or survey or whatever this is, mine and the one we just created here. So now, like, you can go ahead and change any of these things. And so I wouldn't want to change any of these things in this file, because then I'm basically saving all of that stuff to the dgnlib, and that will affect everything. So the first time that you place this label in any other file, it will save that label definition to the file, just like this. That label definition in the file can be edited, but then that only pertains to that particular file. So just something to be aware of. Like if you've got a particular file that you want something to look different for whatever reason, you could save that label definition there and make some changes to it if you wanted to. So with everything set, I just want to go ahead and hit place. And in this case, I've got nothing on my cursor, but if I look at the bottom left here, it says identify point station element. So what that's basically saying, what element are we using for the station? I'm going to click. And because the target, that's for target 1, and because target 2 is using the same click, essentially the same element for the offset, I don't have to click again. And so I'll just click to the endpoint of this line, and it gives me the station and the offset of that point. So I'm sure all of you have seen these little dots that appear when you do that. The dots is where all the data is stored. And so this is an interesting thing that you can kind of use too when you're creating your other labels. You can see what other sorts of data is on this point. So these are all the other fields that you could potentially use for a label. So this is a good place to kind of go to see, like, like point profile projected elevation. Maybe we can use that in our next label for creating an elevation. So that's kind of how I determined, like, I could use that. If you scroll down some more, it's just got all of these other labels. So the other one I'd started using was vertical and plan, because it's more simply stated as profile elevation. So you can see that's 100.378, and that's the same thing as up here, 100.378. So that it's basically pulling that elevation into two different things here. So we'll get into that in a second and show how you can create that label. But the great thing is, once you place this, you can move it around. Justification changes when you shift it around. If the offset of this line changes, the offset changes. If the station changes because of the arc, that station changes. So you can see how in our setting, the label stayed in the same place and the leader moved. So if we had done the other setting, the relative association, I believe it's called, let's see. Let's open a Civil Labeler. So if I go ahead and turn this one on in place, do it to this guy, and then this moves, the whole label moves instead. So you can kind of decide, how do you want it to work? I personally prefer this. So now I have more, like, it might be that I've got a piece of text here, a piece of text here, a piece of text here, here. I don't want this label to move into all that piece of text. I've already got the little spot where it fits. And then if I need to slide it over a little bit, I can do that after the fact. So when we did that change, so you can see that the definition still held there. But if I did this change, it's showing that it's changed, but it's not going to stay that way unless I come and actually edit the label definition itself. So you might just want to be aware of that. If you want it to continue doing this relative association, then go set that in the label definition. Okay, so we can just delete those two labels. Even when we delete them, the definition stays here. So let's add the elevation to that label. So I don't need to open up that. We need to create, so we can keep our same text style. We can keep the same dimension style and element template, but I need to make a new text favorite. So I'm going to go into my text favorite manager, find this, and we'll just right click and copy, and then I'll click the folder, right click and paste. And then I want to rename this to station offset elevation. Now I can continue to use that text favorite I already had. All the fields are populated, and I can go down to the next line and find my civil element properties, annotation, linear plan. And like I said, point, you could use point profile projected slope, or I'm sorry, projected elevation, because that populates with the elevation, or what I've been using lately is vertical in plan profile elevation. So again, we'll come over here and set the format. I want MU label so that I get the foot symbol. We'll go in with our accuracy, again, 2 decimal places. And you can change anything else you want, but I don't really see anything else that we need to change. We could put in here the prefix EL, or I can just type EL and leave that static. So that's just a piece of text that I could come in later and edit once I place the label. And again, I want to save the preview, and we'll accept, and that'll save that in there. I hit save. Okay, so we've got that. Now I need to go create, let's close up the library so it stops doing that. I'm going to, again, copy this definition, and it automatically just copies it below and gives it another number after it. Call it elevation, right click manage. And so I'll select the new text favorite that I just created. In this case, the targets are going to be the same as they were for station offset. Target 1, target 2 are going to be from the first identification point, but target 3, I want to pull that elevation from a different element such as this. So then I'm just going to say select, and that changes the target 3 to green to kind of signify, okay, I've got 2 targets that I need to select now, and the order is important because you need to select the alignment first, and then the element that you want to pull the profile elevation from second. So then we'll move over, and a lot of this stuff is going to stay the same. Data point, we want to continue to use that. Auto left, right, center. Everything pretty much stays the same, which is nice. So you can see how once you create one label, you can kind of spin off a bunch of other labels with the same formatting. Makes it kind of easy that way. So since we've got all that good to go, we just hit save. Open up our civil labeler again. And let's do that one. So we'll go ahead and place, select the alignment first, select the element that I want to get a profile from second, snap. And now I've got an elevation. So that elevation again will change. If we pop this back out to 100, the station and elevation should change. So I know I did a webinar of this recently where in my file, the elevation was not changing for whatever reason. So if your elevation isn't changing, all you have to do is go grab the element with the profile that you want the elevation to change. You're going to open up the profile model of that and then click out, and the elevation should update. It just could be that for whatever reason, this thing, the label isn't updating. It could be that my file was from 10.10 updated to 10.11, and this one's a 10.12 file. Could be any number of things, but that's the way to make sure that it does update. And so you can see, once we change this back to -24, everything's changing. You can still move the label around, put it wherever you want, and all the text stays the same. So that's pretty handy. Obviously, there's many more labels that you can make, and I'll probably keep an eye out for any comments that I get to see if there's other labels that people want to make. I have some thoughts about maybe like a begin-end project, a station equation, those sort of labels, or like a intersection of a main line and a side street label, something like that. We can go over a few different types of labels, maybe jump into some profile and cross-section labels. That will be covered in another video, but the next thing I want to do is show you guys how to get this dgnlib to show up in any of your files, and we'll cover that next. So I've closed down ORD here, and I've got a couple things that we're looking at here. I've gone ahead and created a configuration file, which is basically a text file that you can open up in Notepad, or I've got Notepad++, which has some additional capabilities here. And so you could create this file by just creating a text file and giving it a .cfg file extension. So I've got this file open here, and whenever anything has a pound sign in front of it, it's basically commented out, so it means it's not going to do anything. So you can see I've got these 5 lines here, which are helping me load my console main dgnlib into ORD. And so if you look at the beginning of each one of these, the variable that I'm appending is here. And then we've got the symbol, the greater than symbol, to mean append. And then this is what I'm appending to that variable. So inside the FDOT workspace, this variable right here has been given a value of, let's see, it is this location right here that we're in. So inside the FDOT workspace, they have basically defined this variable to mean go to this folder. And then we're going to that folder, dgnlib feature definitions, looking for console main. So if we go there, dgnlib feature definitions, we should find what we're looking for. So you can see that's the case for all 5 of these. And then we've got all of these variables. So this variable is controlling civil labeler, and that's basically the label definitions. So that's how it's looking for that. And then obviously you've got dimension styles, element templates, text favorites, text styles. So this is what I have for my standard configuration. And for this example, I've gone ahead and copied that and added the same 5 lines below to load this labels main.cfg. And so I've got this configuration variable sitting right here in that FDOT standards folder. And as long as you put that in this location, any of these variables that you are appending with new values will be loaded when ORD loads. So one thing to remember is always add a carriage return. So add an extra line here at the end, and you should be good to go in getting the labels main.dgnlib to load in any ORD file that you open. So next we'll open up ORD and see that our labels main.dgnlib is loaded. We'll place some labels and take a look at some of the predefined configuration variables in FDOT and explain why we have to add or append these extra values to the configuration variables. So here we are in my sample project, and I've basically just got my model file open so that we have some line work to use to test out some of these label definitions. And so we're going to go ahead and open up Civil Labeler. And now that I have my configuration file in place, I have my test roadway that we created. I've got my couple labels here. So we can basically come in here and place any of these. I'll select the alignment, snap to this point, and place a label. You can see over here, it has placed that label definition now in this file. So if I wanted to make change to that label definition, I could come in here and manage this and make the change to the label in this file, and that would only apply to this file. Go ahead and just place this other one here just to check that one out. Select the alignment, select the line that's for the curb return that is profiled, and we'll go ahead and select that and place that too. So you can see that those labels now work, and we can basically use those labels anywhere. So obviously I've got my console roadway in here as well with all of my various labels I've created because of that configuration variable or that configuration file sitting in the standards folder. And I just kind of wanted to dive into real quick what the configuration variables actually look like. So if we go ahead and open up settings, configuration variables, you can find a lot of them by just typing dgnlib, and that'll load quite a few of these. So we can look at some of these that we know about, like text styles. If we open that up, this is kind of where I figured out, you know, what some of these variables are and how they're defined and where they point to, because you can see the values up here and then the expansions down here. So it kind of helps you see where things are going. But these last two here are the ones that are being loaded by my configuration file. And so the first two are the only ones that actually get loaded in here. And so you can see it's targeting that same location where I put my console main and labels main, but it's looking for a dgnlib with a name that has text styles in it, specifically like this. And you can see as we go through some of these other configuration variables that in order to make my labels main dgnlib, whatever I would name this, show up using the stock FDOT configuration variables, I'd have to make this name really long to include all of the words that each variable is looking for. And so in this case, I'd have text styles. If you open up text favorites, you can see this one's looking for text favorites. If you open up dimension styles, that one's looking for dim styles. So you can see my name would essentially have to be text labels, dim styles, text favorites, you know, all of these things, they'd have to be in that name for it to find it. So instead of doing that, I just find all the variables that I need to change and append my own values to those variables. So that's pretty much it for this video. Thanks everyone for, you know, watching along and definitely for showing up to Flug and providing a lot of great feedback. And it was great seeing everybody there. What I hope to do with some more future videos is to maybe get some feedback on some labels that maybe you guys want to see me create and how you go about using them. I know I got a question while we were at Flug about why do we even feel the need to create these custom dgnlibs. I will say I created my custom dgnlib originally out of necessity because early on in ORD, there just wasn't that many labels created by FDOT. And so I found myself wanting to figure out how to do it and modify the labels that were available and start creating some of my own, because each project is unique and you find that you need way more labels than you ever think you're going to need. And it would be nearly impossible for FDOT to provide us with all the labels that we need. And then it also kind of gives you the opportunity to make things look just how you want them to look. And so I continue to use my labels that I've created as we move through the different versions of FDOT Connect. And so I'm not really at the mercy of FDOT changing their labels, as long as I know that my labels are on the right levels and they say the correct, or they have the correct information and everything works out. I can continue to use them and add to them. You know, so each and every project I might add some labels to the ones I've already created and continue to build that library up as I go along. Another question we talked about was, you know, who's going to ultimately be responsible for handling this dgnlib? And it's probably going to be a good idea for you to have one or two people that are responsible for managing the dgnlib. So having some sort of system for people to request certain labels to be added to the dgnlib would be a good idea. But definitely don't have multiple people trying to constantly add labels to it. You want to have somebody, one or two people that understand how to keep things organized and maintain consistency throughout the dgnlib. I have tried using this with ProjectWise as well. You can basically do the same thing. Like you can create that configuration file and put it in the same location in the FDOT Connect folder. It's just on your ProjectWise directory. And then you can obviously populate the labels main file in the same location as well. So the workflow is essentially the same. It's just inside ProjectWise Explorer. So in that case, it's really easy for everybody to have that same labels main dgnlib because it's in the ProjectWise server. If you're not using ProjectWise, obviously someone would need to create the dgnlib, and if you're using workstation installs, distribute it to all of your users. The way I do it is we have a server copy, and then every time I go and make changes to it, I can go on our team's team and put a notification that says I've made changes and to go grab the new one from the server and put it on your machine. And with that, I think that was all of the questions that I can remember from Flug. Again, thanks everybody for coming out, and please send me feedback on any labels you'd like to see in the future, and I'll do my best to get some videos out relatively soon with some other labels that you can create. Thanks again. Bye.